I was watching Emer's stream from the other night, and in his stream, he was talking about how when he was flying home from New York, he got stuck in Detroit's airport for 6 hours, and he was complaining about how boring it was and how terrible it was. Well, I got a little insulted by that because I have an airplane story of my own, and it puts Emers to shame, okay? I don't want to hear Emer talk because what I had to go through a couple months ago, what Emer went through pales in comparison to that, alright? Let me tell you. So a couple months ago, I visited Josh Darkness. He lives over by Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it was pretty cool. We went and saw Def Leppard and everything. And when I was flying home, my flight route was supposed to be to fly from Harrisburg to Atlanta, from Atlanta, and then catch a flight in Atlanta, Georgia, and fly to Bloomington, Illinois, which is pretty close to where I live. Anyway, when I was going home, I caught my flight for Atlanta. That was all good. I landed in Atlanta at around 11:30, and I went to the gate to wait for my flight to Bloomington. So I go to my gate. The flight's supposed to take off at like 11:30, I think, but they kept delaying it. 11:30 became 12:30. And then 1:30, and then 2:30. I mean, we waited there for like 3 hours. They finally let us on the plane after 3 hours, and we had no idea what was going on. We had no idea why the flight was being delayed. So the pilot comes on, he goes, sorry about the delay, guys. We had this part that was missing, but we got it now, and we'll be able to take off for Bloomington, and we'll get there as fast as we can. We're like, great, finally we'll be able to go home. So we wait for 5 minutes. Pilot comes back out. He goes, sorry guys, we're having a little bit of an issue here. We're overfueled. We gotta let some of the fuel off the plane, but after that, we'll head right off to Bloomington. And I was like, what? What kind of problem is that? Overfueled? That makes no sense. How do you get overfueled? So anyway, we're sitting there waiting for like a half hour, and it was miserable because it was July. We're in Atlanta, Georgia. The sun was beating down on the plane, and it was getting hot in there. But we're just sitting there waiting and waiting, and like a half hour later, the guy comes out. He goes, we have another issue with the plane. We're going to have to let you off and cancel the flight. Derp da derp. So awesome. At this point, it's like 4 o'clock, and I should have been home like 4 hours ago. So I go to the Delta phone lines. I called them, and I asked them if they could book me another flight to Bloomington. They said yes, we have this flight. It's supposed to take off at like 6:30 or something, like an hour from now. So I'm like, great. So I finally have a flight home. So I get in line to get my ticket for my flight to Bloomington. And I get up to the ticket counter, and the lady says to me, sir, I'm sorry. This flight has been overbooked, and we can't let you on the flight. Womp womp. Second flight I got screwed over on that day. So I go back to the phone and call Delta again. I said, could you book me on a flight to maybe another city in central Illinois, like maybe Springfield or Champaign or something? They said, we have a flight for Peoria. We'll book you on that. I'm like, great. So they booked me on this flight for Peoria. I go to the gate for the flight to Peoria, and guess what? The flight had already left. In fact, it had left like a half hour before I called them. They booked me on a flight that had already left. Can you believe that? Third flight I got screwed over on that day. So I go back to the phone. I call them. I say, well, yeah, that flight had already left. Book me on another flight, please. So they booked me on another flight for Bloomington, and it was supposed to take off at like 9 o'clock, I think. At this point, I'd been there for 10 hours. So I go to the gate. They delayed it, and delayed it. And finally, they delayed it to like 11 p.m. or something. Then after they delayed it for 11 p.m., they moved the gate, which the flight was supposed to take off from, and I didn't know it. So I'm waiting at this gate for like 2 hours for a flight that isn't even mine. So I had to run over to the gate that they had moved a flight to Bloomington to, and I see a bunch of people just sitting out there. And they were from some of these people have been there for hours, waiting to go home. So they had the plane there. It was all ready and everything. It was all fueled. Everything was great. So we're all just sitting there waiting to board the flight to Bloomington. And we're waiting and we're waiting. Finally, someone comes out and says, "Sorry guys, we couldn't find a pilot for the flight to Bloomington and the flight's been canceled." Fourth flight I got screwed over on that day. So, yeah, that was a bunch of bullshit. So, what we had to do is we had to go to the customer service desk for Delta. And we stand in line, there's a bunch of people in the line, and I've seriously waited in that line for like 2 hours. So I'm sitting there waiting and waiting. Finally, someone comes out and says, "Sorry guys, the customer service desk for Delta has been closed. You're going to have to go down to the customer service desk at the main gate," or like the main terminal, or whatever. You know, Atlanta Airport is such a huge airport. It's like the biggest airport in the country, as a matter of fact. So we had to go all the way to this customer service desk that's like 2 miles away. And I'm practically running. And I get in this other line. This other line's like 5 times longer. So I'm standing in this line for like... I was seriously in that line for at least 5 hours. Because when I finally got up to the customer service desk, it was about 5 in the morning. So, you know, I tried to rebook my flight. The idiot woman behind the counter kept trying to book me on a flight to Chicago, which I live like 3 hours away from Chicago, and it was irritating. She kept insisting that I go to Chicago. I'm like, "Look, lady, I live like 3 hours away from Chicago. Book me on a flight to Bloomington, damn it." So finally, she booked me on this flight to fly me from Atlanta to Raleigh, North Carolina, North Carolina to Detroit, Michigan, then Detroit, Michigan to Bloomington, Illinois. And I'm like, fine, whatever, as long as I get home. So she hands me like this bag. It has like a pillow and a blanket and stuff in there, because they expected me to sleep at the airport, which I did not do. I stayed up for the rest of the night, or by this time it was morning. I stayed up until my flight took off. So finally I was able to take off from Atlanta, and I was getting sick of that airport by then, so I was glad to just get out of that frickin' airport. So I get on my flight to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I get there. My flight to Detroit had been delayed. So by the time I got to Detroit, I would have missed my flight. So fifth flight, I got screwed over in one day. Thanks, Delta. So I called my mom, and she was able to, you know, she called the airline, was able to work things out, and she got me a new flight route on a different airline. This time it was American Airlines. So I had new flights. I was able to fly from Raleigh to Chicago, then Chicago to Bloomington, and that was all good. But yeah, that was a pretty miserable day, and if I never have to go through anything like that again, I'll be quite happy. And so yeah, Emer, I don't want to hear you complaining, buddy, because I didn't have my DS with me. All I had was an iPhone, and the battery was pretty much dead most of the time, so I'm pretty much just standing around doing nothing, looking like a complete tool. To make things worse, it was the 4th of July, so I didn't get to go to any cookouts or see any fireworks. Only fireworks I got to see was the lightning storm at the Atlanta airport. So that's probably going to go down as the worst holiday I've ever had. So, yeah. And if you guys have any exciting airport stories, I'd love to hear them. Post a video response or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and end this little video now.